Good evening. In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act, the notice requirements have been satisfied. Meeting dates for the year are confirmed at the annual meeting are posted in the public bulletin board in the lobby of the Municipal Center and published in the record within the first 10 days of the new year. Copies of full, revised, or additional meeting notices are sent via fax to the Record, Suburbanite, and Northern Valley Press and are posted in the public bulletin board in the lobby of the Municipal Center. For the record, we are awaiting Councilman Barzalato. As far as you know, he's coming.
I haven't heard otherwise.
I had he's trying to get here. He had a doctor's appointment, but he's trying to get here.
Okay, and Councilwoman Hayter is out of the country, as far as I know. Just a reminder, we have a combined meeting, a work session followed by a public hearing. Public comment will be taken when we start the public meeting, which hopefully won't be that long. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the historic designation of 89 new homes on Highwood Avenue, 89 and 93. And if you recall, at the last meeting, we took our first vote on that, and the second vote, unless we decide otherwise tonight, will be taken in the public meeting as whether or not to designate these two homes as historic. So what led up to the last meeting, during the last meeting, we had both homeowners were here, and we discussed with them whether or not they would support the designation. And we had been given the sense that the homeowners supported the designation. The conversation as it went last meeting was a little contrary to that. So we wanted the Historic Preservation Commission, which I believe was under the impression the homeowners supported the designation, to absorb what went on at the last meeting, to come back and give us a sense of whether, how they want us to proceed. They initially recommended the designation. As our normal process is, it went to the planning board. The planning board concurred with that recommendation, and now it's up to the mayor and council. We have the final say, but I think we all agreed that we wanted to hear once again from the Historic Preservation Commission and our chair. Ms. News is here, so would you like to lead the discussion, please?
Sure. That was very interesting to be here last week because obviously the homeowners had a lot to say, and I felt that they were really engaged in the discussion with all of you, which I thought was a healthy sign. I have to say that I've talked to the members and filled them in on what transpired last week, and I also talked to each of the homeowners when we left the meeting. We had a long conversation out in the lobby as you proceeded on with your meeting. So I prepared a few brief remarks and thoughts on paper so I don't forget anything, but the main point to put across tonight is that the HPC feels very strongly that both of these properties should be landmarked. We studied these properties at great length. We met with the homeowners, we debated the issue in our publicly announced meetings, and then we took a vote, and our vote was unanimous in this case. And we felt very strongly that both of these properties should be landmarked. We voted to recommend designation to mayor and council, and that opinion has not changed, but there normally wouldn't be a re-vote of something like that after it's been transferred to the mayor and council and then on to the planning board. We do have a lot of experience working with old houses and our property owners who own them, and we don't find the layers of approval to be cumbersome, and most of our homeowners come away from the process very happy. And I say that, and specifically thinking of cases where homeowners did have to file for certificates of appropriateness, which is another layer of review that the building office requires and your local ordinance requires. And quite often these homeowners are much happier with the results of our discussion than what they brought to us to begin with. So we have worked very hard since 2006 when Park Street was voted as a historic district and then rescinded, to be user-friendly as a committee of the borough, and to work with our homeowners and educate them as to the process, to streamline the process, and to make it as positive as possible. Now, there are a lot of homeowners of historic structures that we actually don't hear from because they don't come before the Historic Commission. They don't make upgrades to their houses, or they don't need to make repairs. Like, you know, in the 10 years that I've been on the commission, there's many that we haven't met yet or dealt with.
Mr. Farley, I know you have a hearing problem. Why don't you sit over here for the time being?
Isn't there somebody sitting there?
Yes, but
That was my seat.
she's
I'm going to
making a
stand there.
presentation, and I'd like you to be able to hear it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Peter.
So, as I said, we evaluated these buildings, these two particular buildings, which are among Tenafly's most unique and iconic properties, and they represent an era of history that is quickly vanishing in Tenafly. Buildings like these give Tenafly its character, and they build value for the entire community, and they distinguish the town for the premium it places on its historical assets. We are unique in Bergen County. I can think of just a few other towns. Maybe Ridgewood is one example where towns have really made an effort to preserve their historic structures, and those structures really stand out and give value to the entire community. And I believe that people do buy in Tenafly for the school system, yes, and for the services that the borough provides. But some of those services include protecting our historical assets, things like the railroad station and our quaint downtown and some of its more historic houses. I would say consideration of these two properties have been on the HPC agenda for a long time. We published this report in February of 2016, but a report like this doesn't just get done in less than a month. It actually was started initially in 2015, and of course we had discussed it even earlier and waited until we had the funds available to hire the independent architectural historian to do these reports. And sometimes I believe one of our homeowners even said, well, why now? Why this house now? Well, we can only do so many houses in a calendar year, and we are a relatively small commission of 7 people, and we've had other important issues on our agendas in the past years. We put a lot of energy in trying to save 53 Knickerbocker, and of course there was 87 County Road, and we had other designations in that time period. So 89 and 93 Highwood it's not hard to see that these are iconic buildings and have historical value, but we don't want to assume anything, and that's why we do have an independent architectural historian go to the trouble of studying these houses. We've actually had some cases, 2 cases in particular, where homeowners came to us and wanted their homes designated. We spent the time and money to study them, and the architectural historian came back and said, while they were interesting houses, they really didn't justify historic designation. So it's not an automatic process, and we don't rubber stamp anything. These are very thoughtful discussions that we have, and only after we have studied these houses can we ascertain their history and their value to the community. What else can I say? These 2 particular houses are very visible in our community. They're right on one of the major roads in town. It's on one of the oldest roads in town. This was the route that Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony would have taken to get from Stanton's home down to the train station, and both of these women traveled all over the country giving lectures and fighting for women's suffrage. And so Tenafly has played a role in that, and these houses were on that path, and we know from our history that Sisson was a friend of Stanton's, and the approximate ages of the houses are the same. They were built in, these 2 houses were built between 1867 and 1874, and Stanton's house, I believe, was 1858. And all 3 of these houses are examples of Second Empire architecture, which is increasingly rare. Let's see. I can also say that we would like to see these houses both designated. We consider them a set of twin houses. They were built to resemble, to be identical. The first house that was built was at 89 Highwood, and the owner of that house then built the house next door for the rest of his family, and for his son in particular. And the architectural importance of these two houses are increased because they are a pair of twin adjacent houses, which together illustrate certain architectural values of the Second Empire style. I understand that homeowners have reservations about landmarking, and those are very valid reservations. Anytime you change zoning on a piece of property, it's something to consider with a certain degree of gravitas, and to think about how it impacts the borough as well as the homeowner. And I would say that of all the different types of zoning laws we have in Tenafly, historic landmarking is really an enhancement to the borough. It's often, I wouldn't say often, but it's an enhancement to the house itself. It's an honor bestowed on that house. And we've had examples in Tenafly where homeowners, that we have approached homeowners and said we were interested in landmarking their houses, and they were quite honored and fully participated in the process. A recent example is 20 Forest Road. This is a house that we had on our sort of bucket list, if you will, our watch list. We were nervous about the house perhaps disappearing at some point, and we had owners that were receptive to the suggestion that they have the house landmarked. They were quite honored to have the house landmarked. And then we had other cases where we've had homeowners approach us and ask for landmarking. And we've studied the houses, and sometimes, like I said, sometimes they don't qualify and sometimes they do. What I was going to say, and with all due respect to Mr. Farley and to Mrs. Vespana, is that whether the homeowners want designation or not is actually not written into the borough ordinance. Unfortunately, that is not part of it. It's the way the ordinance was crafted. And maybe that's not so important, unfortunately, because then it allows us to make a more dispassionate assessment of whether the house merits designation. The HPC is here to advocate for the historical assets of the town and to speak on behalf of all citizens who choose to live here because of the style and character of the town. So that's really our role in this. Our role is to educate the public and to protect the historic resources of this town, whether it's by landmarking buildings, by approving changes that people want to make and making sure those changes are being done well, by helping the DPW or the mayor or a particular department orchestrate changes, say like the recent repairs to the Tenafly Railroad Station, which you all orchestrated and approved. Some of those changes were first identified, some of those improvements were first identified by members of the HBC and brought to your attention. Resco Park's another good example. So if you all have any questions, you have the reports in front of you. I'll be happy to answer any questions. But we feel very strongly that these should be designated as landmarks and designated together as a pair.
Does anybody, any member of the council have a question for Karen or the HPC in general in regards to this subject matter?
I have something to say, but I don't have a question.
Well, Lisette, when is this going to take place?
The hearing is October 24th.
So it's not tonight?
No.
Okay.
Because of municipal land use law, we have to give the planning board 35 days to review. I confirmed with Valerie that ordinance is being reviewed by the planner for consistency with the master plan, and it will be listed for the October 11th planning board meeting.
Okay, so before, you know what, before you ask your question or make a comment, is there anybody here representing 89 or 93 Highwood that would like to say something? George, do you have anything you'd like to say?
No.
Anybody from 93 here? Okay. Then Mark, please go.
So I support the historic designation of both these houses for a couple of reasons, and without going through the historic report, thank you very much for all that hard work. It's very detailed. We have to decide, if we want to preserve a particular culture or aspect of the town, we have to make decisions that actually do that. We can't just kind of hope the historic preservation group prepares quality reports and we talk about it, but we have to act on it. I think that's very important. We didn't designate 53 Knickerbocker because around this table we made very strong arguments that the value of that piece of property was in the land and not the house itself. So that the loss to the owners was so tremendous it overrode the historic designation there, and we all backed away from designating that. These particular properties, it's not the same thing. I would almost argue that these two properties are more historic than 53 Knickerbocker was. The history is further in time in Tenafly, and people were more involved in what went on here. Now, the value of these homes are in the homes, not in the land. You're not going to subdivide this land to build 10 houses or put up an apartment building or anything else. And, we've been critical of the historic preservation group in the past because they haven't looked forward. They've kind of looked at things after what's the phrase, the horse is out of the barn or whatever. Well, here they've looked forward, they've done all the work. I think these two houses deserve historic preservation, and I think it's the right thing to do for the town for the long term. And perhaps at another time we have a conversation about whether we give some sort of discount to people who have historically preserved houses for their building permits in terms of their alterations and things like that, as a little bit of a give and take, and maybe we can talk about that in the future. Those are my comments.
You spoke very well. Anybody else have a comment?
Just
6 months of practice.
very short. I think that we should move forward with the designation. It's a report that was very well done. It preserves the character of the town, and I don't see a reason that we should not move forward.
Okay. So the vote on this will take place on October 11th.
24th,
24th? Sorry.
planning board.
There will be a planning board will discuss it again in their meeting on October the 11th. Interested parties may attend the planning board meeting on the 11th or the final hearing on the 24th, and then the council will make the final decision. I think Mark said really all that needs to be said. I'll only say that I drive Highwood all the time, and I've known Mr. Farley for, I'm embarrassed to say how many years we know each other, probably close to 30 years, and I've always admired his home, noting that the home next to it is close to identical to it. And for those of us that believe in, we love Tenafly the way it is, we're not, we don't make changes easily. Well, this is part of what Tenafly is, and it would be a shame if it ever changed. And we also owe the HPC a great debt for the amount of work that went into this to put us in this position. They really went, the whole 9 yards, including major discussions with the homeowners, trying to let them know that this isn't something that they need to fear. This is something that, look, both homeowners have agreed that their homes are special, and I know George takes great care in preserving his home, and I got the impression from the other homeowner that they do the same. So we're just going to give them as much assistance as possible. I look at this as the town designates the home and also puts an opportunity for homeowners to get the assistance they might need to keep the house the way it is. And we're giving these homeowners more than we give other homeowners because they've taken on the designation, and I think that's a great thing to do. And like Karen said, there aren't that many towns that go to this level to do this. So thank you, George, and thank you the other homeowner for keeping the homes the way they are. And we'll discuss it again on the 11th and for the final time on the 24th. And if anybody in the audience wants to talk about it tonight during public comment, you should feel free to do that. We have next the Environmental Commission request to amend the smoking ordinance. I see the chair of the Environmental Commission is here, and if he can keep his comments to less than 3 minutes. You want to just give us a sense of why the Environmental Commission has put this before us?
In the session of the legislature that just completed, the legislature passed a law that allows municipalities to decriminalize smoking ordinance. Previous to that, if your municipality, like Tenafly, prohibited smoking, the penalty had to be a disorderly person's offense, which carried a penalty of $200 or 60 days in jail, which seems excessive for taking a puff outside the door. And I believe it wasn't enforced very often for that reason. We feel that the ordinance allows Tenafly to make a much more appropriate punishment for smoking, and that is to change it from a criminal offense to a civil offense, which would require a summons, not require a court appearance, and hopefully would have the same deterrent effect and would allow the police or the other enforcing agencies to be more willing to issue summonses for smoking as appropriate when they're where it's appropriate. And for that reason, we propose a change to the borough code which would take that effect, change it from a disorderly offense to a civil violation. I've spoken to the chief, and although he's a cigar smoker, he concurs. He has no problems with this. He feels that removing the court appearance would be a benefit to the enforcement of it. And for that reason, I support it, and I appreciate it. And for those cigar smokers on the table here, it has no effect on their smoking.
So, in other words, I can smoke on town property now. It's only going to cost me $200. I don't have to go to jail.
The threat has been removed.
Okay.
Bill, as our borough
To county
attorney,
jail, anyhow. You don't go anymore to the local jail.
do you have any thoughts on this?
No, it makes it an ordinance violation, so as opposed to, well, disorderly persons offenses aren't really crimes, but they're offenses. Ordinance violations are the next step down, which is perfectly fine. My question is, would the police actually enforce an ordinance violation? You know, in past years, I know that the police have been hesitant to get involved in what's simply an ordinance violation, because
Well, I
it's sort of
think
beneath them to enforce.
Like most of these ordinance offenses, it really only takes place if somebody complains about it, okay? And usually before somebody complains about it, they take the time to ask a person to put their cigarette away, and usually they go to the police only when somebody doesn't respond properly.
Yeah, I don't see it as a moneymaker for the borough.
No, I don't think anybody's looking at it as a moneymaker, but I think what they're proposing is full of common sense, and we don't exhibit that all that often, so maybe this would be a good time to do it. Anybody at the table have any thoughts?
We're in agreement.
Yeah, we're in agreement. That's fine.
We're in agreement.
2014.
So what's the action on this one?
Well, what's that?
What's the action?
An ordinance would be drafted for introduction.
All right, so I think from what I hear or don't hear, Bill, you'll take care of that?
Yeah, we go into general,
Well, it'll be
general
an amendment to an
regulations,
ordinance, or?
No, we don't have an ordinance on it now.
We do.
They have to be.
Oh,
No, it's
we
state.
have it for a state, there's a state
It's a state statute.
statute.
It's chapter 3. No.
Right, but in other words, now we would, we don't have an ordinance that makes it
Right.
an ordinance violation.
All right, so you'll take care of that?
But yeah.
Actually-
We would go into general regulations.
Okay. I think we do have that.
Passed an ordinance a few years ago that prohibits smoking in public
No,
buildings and in public.
There is in the ordinance for smoking, 13-16.6 states, references the older state statute that is a disorderly person's offense.
Okay, so we'll amend that.
Yes.
Okay, the NJDOT, Safe Routes to School, Jewel, please.
Just by way of background, before we look at the draft memo provided by Mazer, this this is actually a recommendation to not accept the grant at this point in time.
Well, explain what
And
the
I'm going
grant is.
to, yeah. This is actually the second time that we've been, I think unfortunately, in this position. If you will recall, back in 2013, we applied for, and after over a year later, received a grant for the sidewalk for Downey Drive under Safe Routes to School. The process of approval and going to contract took so long that we actually wound up doing the project on our own and turning back that grant. We were advised at the time by our borough engineer that that was not anything that would cause NJDOT to blacklist us or hesitate to give us a grant in the event that we had an eligible project. And I guess that was proven by the fact that they did give us another grant. Now this grant that we're talking about tonight was for a project that we developed in conjunction with the Board of Education to do some sidewalks and rehabilitate the parking area at Stillman Street School. This grant was from the 2014 program, and approximately a year later, in 2015, we received a grant approval letter giving us a grant in the amount of $146,000 for that project, and that would have covered the complete cost of the project. The grant to this, in over almost the past 2 years, has not been implemented because of the fact that NJDOT held off on issuing any contracts because they were in the process of changing a variety of rules. Some rules that were being mandated by the Federal Highway Administration, which is where these funds actually come from, and some things that they were doing internally. One of the changes that they made initially was that they were no longer allowing grant recipients to use their own engineers. They wanted to control the engineering process so that they could better administer the Federal Highway Administration's grant rules. They put out an RFP, they got 3 firms, and the idea was that you would have to select one of these 3 firms in order to move forward with your grant. They have just been very slow. They didn't do it. They didn't take any action on allowing grant recipients to select an engineer. Then the contract that they generated with that solicitation expired. Then we had the trust fund freeze. So that was another reason that they couldn't implement it. Then they told us that they were going to issue another RFP, which they haven't done
And that's just for the engineer, correct?
This is just for the engineer. Now, this is what's been going on just in terms of so-called contract to implementation, which is yet to occur. But in the meantime, they've instituted another whole new set of rules related to things that the Federal Highway Administration now requires every state Department of Transportation to sign off on. And based on the analysis and review by our engineer, who also not only serves in Tenafly but also in other Bergen County communities, the thinking at this point is that the rules that they've come up with for how to administer these grants are so onerous that it would actually ultimately cost us more to accept and implement the grant than it would be for us to just do the project out of our own resources if that's what we chose to do. Now, Mazer has indicated that that is their recommendation, but their recommendation is based purely on dollars and cents. It's up to the borough whether or not we accept that recommendation and whether or not we want to direct them or authorize them to send a letter to DOT rejecting or declining the grant. Not only do they have a whole new set of rules related to things that you have to do pertaining to right-of-way, civil rights, environmental, but they make it very clear that as the LPE, the local project administrator, which is how they would refer to any county or municipality that's operating a grant, they actually want you to have a full-time public employee who is accountable for the project. They want an individual who basically, almost on a full-time basis, oversees any project that you put into place utilizing these funds.
Can I interrupt you with a question?
Sure.
Could you explain the civil rights issues over a sidewalk?
Well, the civil rights issues over a sidewalk have to do with the bidding and contracting of the work.
It's just a contracted issue, so you don't discriminate.
Yeah.
It's a regular stuff.
That's just one of a lengthy list.
I have
So-
a couple of questions. Oh, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, so, I mean, why would we ever hire a full-time employee to watch over $156,000 worth of sidewalk work?
That's exactly the
Absurd.
issue. Well, their suggestion is that you hire someone as a full-time project manager who they're saying, as they indicate, we're not limiting you to
Just this project.
just this project. You can look over many projects.
Right.
But they are basically defining how we would structure ourselves to oversee the project, including daily inspections
Well, so
of the
does
site.
this preclude us from accepting any bids? Are these going to be the rules and regulations for every one of their grants?
It's interesting because the municipal aid program has not as yet been saddled with these particular rules and regulations. But the Transportation Alternative Program, the Safe Routes to School Program, the Local Safety Program, and the High Risk Rural Road Program in particular are the ones that have been called out for this particular high level of
Just
oversight.
two questions, and then
What
you're
they call
next. You're next.
stewardship.
One is, what is your recommendation? We heard what Mazer has recommended.
We have been trying for almost 2 years, a little over 2 years now, just to deal with the standard aspects of implementation, and that has not even occurred. And we were already kind of wondering whether or not we wanted to continue to keep this as an open obligation. And so now with these additional rules and regulations, which I do believe would be fairly onerous, and I'm not even sure that we would want to sign off on the agreement that's required because of all of the things that they want us to do. So I personally don't have a problem with accepting their recommendation because of not just this whole new set of rules and regulations, but because of the overall process. The fact that it shouldn't take almost 3 years.
My second and last question is, you said we were partnering with the Board of Education on this. Are they aware of the fact that we're considering rejecting the grant?
No, they're not. So the other thing I would be asking from you tonight is not to make a final decision. That's why that's why it's in the draft form, but to put it on our agenda for joint use for October 2nd. I did receive an email today asking for if we had any other items, but I wanted to wait until after it was presented here.
So just to make a comment, this is about Windsor Road and Stillman School.
Correct.
Right. Hamilton Place, the Board of Ed decided to replace the sidewalk, and we can bring this up with joint use as an example to find out the cost. They replaced the sidewalk about a month ago, and I happened to be drinking coffee at my house watching it. And they started about they replaced half the sidewalk, not the whole sidewalk, but just half the sidewalk. They started at about 8 o'clock in the morning. There were about 10 guys there. They ripped up all the concrete, poured all new concrete, and done, complete by 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The Board of Ed handled that whole thing. And I can't imagine they spent anywhere near half to $156,000 for 8 or 10 guys for 8 hours. So
That may be true, and you're right. This is not the largest project that we've ever done.
Sounds ridiculous.
It is ridiculous, and a lot of the when we say onerous, it's because of all the things that they require you to do before you even get to the point that you can pour concrete.
Max?
All right. So I understand that part of the engineering process, Mason's going to be out if we accept it. because they want to have their own engineers to do the work. They have 3 firms, none of them is Mason.
Well,
Mazer.
Mazer was on one of the teams, and that could happen again.
Right.
However, as I said, it's been almost 18 months,
Yeah.
and they have yet to even issue a new
The
RFP.
issue of RFPs and the contracts to be basically, which will include equal opportunity, also, it's going to become a standard to all the grants that they're going to create, because it becomes part of. So, if we don't get ready now, we're going to have to get ready sooner or later, because that's where they go in step by step by step by step, and we're going to get to that. If this project is basically going to take us, if the Board of Ed did it in a day, we're going to do it in 3 months, because that's how the work works. Where 3 months to hire a full-time, 3 months, they don't want to have a full-time employee, they want to have a full-time manager. It's probably going to cost us $30,000. We're going to get $146,000, and we're going to have to spend $30,000 versus for us spending $146,000 ourselves. Plus, we're going to have the management. May's going to manage. They take us 10%. It's going to be another $15,000. So, what I would like to do before, is to see a dollars analysis. What, I understand it's not onerous and all this stuff. I heard that a long time ago. I want to see how much money is going to cost us to comply with that, to be able to say we don't want to have $146,000 because it's going to cost us $260,000. That's a simple decision. If it's just basically we have to comply with some government obligations, we're going to have to comply with them anyhow. So unless we have a decision like that, we cannot even go to the board and say we're not going to do it because we don't feel good about that.
But if we're going to hire someone for just 3 months, that's not a full-time employee.
No, I'm sure
maybe that's the issue. We need to get a better definition of what's a full-time employee mean.
A full-time manager. If they say a full-time manager, it can be a full-time manager of that project.
And they say a full-time employee.
All right.
So like with someone in the DPW who already oversees the roads projects, would he qualify?
Exactly.
Or would you have to pull him off and just?
You'd have to
he
pull
sits
him
there
off and
on Windsor,
just
on the corner of Windsor and Tenafly, watches the sidewalk.
Hold on a second. I mean, like Mark said, the sidewalk job was of 8 hours in length. This job is a little bit more, a bigger job because we're talking about also doing some parking area. But nevertheless, even if it's a job for a week, if we appoint one of our full-time employees as the manager of the job,
for a week,
pulls him off a job for a week, how does that play into things? The next question I was going to ask was, if we would decide, we're going to take this grant, can we get the money tomorrow or once we fill out this form?
No.
It the money? No.
And that was
Give or take 3 years.
that was that was part of it. It's like you have these rules and regulations, but they only kick in if and when DOT moves forward and advances the contract process. They haven't done that either.
Was there, I know you were talking about, I've overheard these conversations where we're going to apply for another grant. I don't know if it's DOT or not. We thought they wouldn't be competing with each other, but
That's the one that one is DOT, that's municipal aid, which is not subject to this particular process, and then the other one is New Jersey Transit.
well, I think before we reject this, we ought to have the discussion with the Board of Ed.
Also,
And also we need an analysis to say why we reject it. Because it's onerous, okay. Onerous means money. How much more is going to cost us?
Well, I think we got a rough idea of what made it onerous tonight. We got a rough idea.
Peter,
Yes.
the issues that we have as onerous is that we have to comply with this and that and that. It's not how much money is going to cost to comply with that?
Well,
It's different than what we typically do. A portion of it is things that we already have to comply with.
Okay.
But in this case, it's at a very hyper level.
And so we're gonna have to hire a lawyer to
You know what, I
get it.
think what the councilman needs is a list of the things that make it onerous.
And how much it's gonna cost us?
Well,
If we have to
sometimes
get
you
the
can
contract,
Sometimes you can put a value on it, sometimes it's just they're asking us to do things we can't do.
Yeah, I think-
and the fact with a full-time employee, what you proposed to have a fellow for a week being that, that's very reasonable. It doesn't cost us practically
Well,
anything.
So we need to get that better defined. what
Yeah,
that means
well-
full-time.
Yeah.
You know, and once again, I'm not suggesting that our professionals are infallible, but at some point in time, Max, you've got to start to accept some things. I'm not suggesting all of the things, but you question everything.
Absolutely.
You know? Well, you shouldn't.
Oh, well.
Okay, that's why we pay our professionals to give us answers. It's okay to look into things.
What we want is the rationale behind the decisions, so
Dan?
we can make a decision.
Jewel, for the Riverside Co-op, if all those towns that we purchase with, if they have the same problem, could we theoretically split the cost of a project manager among the towns as a shared service?
I think we could. But the same problem they have
But if
is
you circle back,
nothing's been implemented.
is it full time yet, or
I think we could spin our wheels here for
Yeah,
quite a
okay.
bit of time
We-
and still have to wait another 2 or 3 years till the DOT gets their act together.
If we cannot get the money, it's clear. That's
Okay.
not a problem.
I don't have the tree ordinance in my agenda, but I under 1D is the tree ordinance. Bill?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't know if everybody has read or read originally Max's suggestion that the tree ordinance be amended to be a little stricter, and the changes would make any development of property that is not an existing residential property would require mitigation.
New construction.
New construction. Well, also new construction or any development of commercial properties, because I mean that's actually the way.
Or even additions being made by somebody who has not been a homeowner. Right?
Additions made. Right. Yes. If it's not a.
So that's not new construction, it's even just
No, but
additions.
my point was that additions to existing structures that are commercial would require mitigation.
But I
where the
also,
same-
if I sell a house to somebody and they want to add on to the house, I think that comes into play as
Well,
well.
that's
No,
No,
that
no.
doesn't.
Okay.
That
if
doesn't
you're the
fall.
owner of the property and as a certificate
And
of
I'm living
occupancy.
there.
Well, it doesn't say.
No.
That's not the way I actually made the change. That's not the
Yeah.
change that Max had. It was if it's an existing structure and you're the owner and a CO has been issued for it, an addition to it that falls within the parameters
Yeah,
because certain things are not covered would not require mitigation.
Well, we all agreed to the changes.
Yes.
What you brought up was the impact, with the planning board and whether it has to go,
Right. So I did draft an ordinance. I actually gave, I showed the changes to, I don't know if you've seen it, but Max has seen it, and I
Yeah.
submitted it to Jeff Zen to determine whether or not it's a development ordinance that has to go to the planning board. He confirmed my suspicion that even though it's not in our LDR, it would be considered a development ordinance, and it would have to go to the planning board after introduction for them to comment on it. So
that's the next step.
that's the next step. You would introduce it tonight. I mean, I sent you. I
I've
know.
been out of the office after 4:30 and I just walked in here, so we sent it out.
Okay, yeah, I had sent the actual language changes out last week, and.
So we don't have-
But today I did, no, today I sent an actual ordinance, very, very simplistic, because only 3 paragraph changes, wording changes, and I did, I think it would be 1717, right?
Yeah.
17, 18.
1718, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't see a 1717, so.
17, 17 is highway.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, I emailed it to you. We could amend
Well,
the,
How do you want to handle this, Lisette?
Let me check my email. I mean, I can go and go in my email and print out so everyone could just look at it, and then it could be a revision to the agenda and the new business or introducing an ordinance.
I mean, the changes are very, very simplistic.
The changes are here already. They were sent out, the changes. The entire ordinance.
No, what was sent out to Jeff Zen that's attached to the agenda is what the changes would be to the code. What
Yes.
Bill's referring to is an actual ordinance format that just goes straight to the point.
Right,
Exactly.
it says amend, add this provision and definitions, and amend the definition of existing residents. And,
So why don't we do this, because it has to go before the planning board anyway.
but introduced first.
We have to introduce
We
it
have to introduce it here.
here.
All right, so, I mean, there's no, we can introduce it at our next meeting and send it over to the planning board,
Good.
okay? Rather than do it hodgepodge.
As
I
a
think this is-
compliment to Bill, he wrote it very nicely with less words than I wrote.
Did the same thing.
That's not hard.
No, normally lawyers make it longer. I made it simpler.
Okay, let's go on to the administrator's report.
Okay, beginning with First Park project implementation. As we indicated in our last meeting, we were given authorization to move ahead with the interview process, which we did. We interviewed Mr. Edward Confair, who is a registered landscape architect and engineer who represented the firm of E&LP. That is the firm which I advised you submitted the basically the best proposal that was 100% compliant with everything that was requested and required in our RFP. He was extremely well prepared, extremely engaging, and very, very knowledgeable. It was very clear that he had put a lot of time and effort in terms of preparing for our discussion, had visited the scene, had basically done some preliminary evaluations and assessments, and we found that his understanding of what the borough was looking for in this project was very consistent. We clarified a few points in the RFP, in his RFP submittal that would be revised just very, very slightly for purposes of contract. And we're recommending that for the meeting of October 10th that we award a contract to the firm of E&LP to undertake the job of doing the design and construction for Resco Park. The building department fee ordinance, we gave you a heads up that we were proposing to make changes in the fee schedule for UCC and code enforcement. Bob Burns had prepared a draft ordinance, and it had actually gotten to the point that it had been submitted to the clerk and put into form for submission to the mayor and council. However, in the meantime, we received a local finance notice from DCA, which indicated that there are new state guidelines pertaining to the amount of municipal revenue that can be generated by these activities. I had a meeting this week, myself and Susan and Bob Burns. We went through the proposed ordinance in detail. We also went through the LFN in detail. And essentially what we determined was that although they announced that there will be guidelines, the guidelines are going to be implemented via a form, a worksheet that has not yet been promulgated. The state indicates that there will be further guidance and that they will be submitting these forms to the auditors for the next cycle. So because of the fact that we're not able to come to a final determination about that particular set of compliance issues, Susan and I suggested to Bob, and he agreed, that he would remove any of the proposed changes that related to general increases. And he has revised it so that he is now looking to only make some changes that were mandated by the state with regard to fire safety, elevators, and above-ground pools. And that is the version that we're proposing to submit for the October 10th meeting. Under the update section...
And those, I'm sorry, and those UCC fees are going to be pretty much the same as we have today. They are increased. Is there a budget saying with this new FCC fees, we probably, based on existing criteria, will get so much more, so much less? Is there any economic view of this?
We don't know yet, and that's why we're not proceeding with the general changes. That is, DCA is going to issue a worksheet to perform that analysis, and if the analysis is going to be performed, it's going to be required as part of our next audit.
All right. Perfect.
So we decided that we should go through the audit for 2017, and the audit report will advise us as to what our status is.
Okay.
The DPW building, as we hoped, a temporary certificate of occupancy has been issued, and we have 3 items outstanding. We can go ahead and there's nothing to stop us from getting the furniture delivered and moving into the building, but we do have to have a final approval by the Bergen County Soil Commission. They'll be coming by this week. And the only other work that will remain to be done on the site will be the demolition of the existing structure, which obviously has to await the move, and the paving of the parking lot. Once those 2 portions are done, we will get a permanent CO. So there is a complete schedule. We went through it today with Andy and Bob and Susan, and we'll submit that to you as additional information. So by mid-October, they will be having the furniture delivered and moving in. Pfister's Pond, as you know, Andy was here at the last meeting. There was some discussion about the status of the pond based on the management report that was submitted by Mazer. There was also some discussion, interaction with Peter Punzi, the Executive Director of the Nature Center, as to which of the actions should be considered, whether or not there was an opportunity to still put the pond in condition that it could be eligible for hydro raking, since at this point the analysis did not think the pond was in condition for utilizing that technique. So a committee was established, and the committee was authorized to get back to me and see if let the engineer know if there were any additional questions that they had. And they did have a question about the existing dike, which was mentioned on page 3 of the report. They're looking to rebuild approximately 2 feet to raise it higher, and an estimate was requested, and the engineer did get back to us with that information, and that memo was contained under old business later in the agenda. Dog park. The request to have the previously considered site located at Foster Road near the municipal complex parking lot was conveyed to Mazer. It was staked out today. If you have an opportunity to look at the location of the stakes, the green ones, I believe, show the size of the area for small dogs. The pink ribbons show the location for large dogs. And in the stake that is closest to the tree that fronts on River Edge Road, Andy has indicated that they could probably actually take that out about another 10 feet and increase it from 80 by 80 to 80 by 90.
Which, can you just please tell us the colors so we can...
Pink is the big dogs.
Pink big dogs.
Green is
Small
small.
dogs.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, that will also come up again under old business, and Mesa did submit some additional information about the staking and about the configurations and the cost estimate. Now, Andy was here today, and keep in mind that the proposal has been scaled back significantly. At this point, it includes primarily only the fencing, and but there are some other cost factors at a minimum that he feels needs to be included. And although we are not planning to do any infrastructure improvements at this time, he did still express some concern that we're not adding electricity or water to the site.
But are we going to put, I looked over there, and in his estimate, he did not include either chip or gravel to be put on
Well,
there.
we agreed
That
that we
would
were
be
going to leave
separate,
it the way it
yeah.
is.
Well,
Just grass.
no,
nature.
he's recommending.
Well, I
wood
know what he's
chips, yeah.
recommending, but at this table, we discussed it, and at the last time we discussed it, it was going to be just whatever is there at the time, but I think that's a little short-sighted. However,
Yeah.
I also believe that at some point in time, a committee can be formed with outside, people beyond the council, and this committee will have the ability to raise significant money, so that if we want to do improvements like electric and water and ground cover, that can be covered, I think, from donations. There's a lot of
That makes
people ready
sense.
to
Yeah,
donate
absolutely.
money.
Yes,
So I think,
absolutely.
We get it off the ground.
Yeah.
let's get the fences up.
Yeah.
Let's get it open,
Kickstart it.
Yeah.
and we'll deal with that because I'm sure we're going to need something on the ground because the dogs will rip it up.
Exactly.
They will.
No, that,
And when it rains, it'll be mud.
and I would personally think, and I'm going to ask the council, if they would not consider also just putting some gravel with it, not only the fence but some gravel as part of that. Because we said it's minimum, but I thought gravel would be
I'm not
a
sure.
necessity.
Dogs
It's
tend
not-
to eat
yeah,
gravel. I'm not sure gravel is an answer.
Whatever it is, the
He
chips,
addressed that.
Chips.
yeah,
Either
chips or
cinders or there are now dog-friendly wood chips. Or
One of
cinders.
those, whatever.
Yeah, something, but
So-
not gravel.
I'm asking the council if it's okay. Part of,
Let's take it one step at a time.
okay, fine.
Froggy Park baby swings, that request is in progress. We're still awaiting the response from the provider, equipment provider and installer. We gave you a copy of the existing plan so that you can see. The main point is that you can't, they're recommending that we can't just slot the swings in there, that he has to
Okay.
see where they're planning and.
And
we
by
have
the
to see
way, I
what has to move
never
in.
did get that petition.
Never got
Well,
that.
yes, Peter,
Yeah.
2 sessions ago, I attached it, it's in the document that I distributed to the council.
What
The
document
petition
is
is there. I have forwarded to the council and Lizette forwarded to everybody.
Did you see
a
this,
copy
Sam?
of a copy of the
I
petition.
saw the email.
Yeah, the email which had the petition attached.
I didn't see it, did you? It's all well and good to say no drones are allowed on over our property. Okay, that's fine, but who enforces it? Our police department?
We start a head division.
Dog hunters.
You'd have to have some ordinance regulation about, just like you have an ordinance that allows you to tow illegal parkers, someone who parks illegally in, say, the Stop and Shop. I think that you should be able to have some regulation that allows the borough to enforce violations of say, airspace above private property. And again, I'm saying that because I think that you should be able to, but I know there are some bills pending in the legislature about local regulation of drones.
Okay, I mean, for example, you read in the
Before
newspapers about these communities
About what you
that
can
pass
and can't do.
pass ordinances, no-knock ordinances, where if a residence, a property is on a list, people can't knock on their door to solicit. Okay?
I just read that.
You could do that for a drone, I guess, too. You know, you have a no drone list. Because, I mean, I'm under the impression that within a few years, there's going to be delivery service by drones. I mean, that's what I hear. Everybody's telling me that. It can't be any worse than some of the outfits that are delivering it on the ground now. But, you know, so how are you going to have an ordinance, you know, in conjunction with the fact that companies are going to start to deliver with drones?
From a practical standpoint, how could we think about enforcing this, regardless of what the ordinance says?
Tough. I don't
Since
know.
you
I
can
mean,
have
there
it,
are incidences now where airplane pilots say they're approaching an airport and they come within a dangerous distance of a drone. And
That's
the
understandable.
comment becomes, well, they can't figure out who's flying the drone. And if the FAA can't figure it out around the airports, you know, all right, so the JCC sees a drone and on their over their building or over their field, or the Board of Education sees one. Okay, you know, it's great. You call the police. How are they going to figure out who's flying it? I don't know. This is an area that really is so new. It's going to be very difficult to regulate it. I think we should simply say that we've reviewed their policy and it's so noted. What else can we tell them?
I mean, drones are supposed to be registered above a certain
Certain
weight
Yeah, the certain
Registered with whom?
with the FAA.
certain
And
brands
every-
and models.
so perhaps there's either a state or a federal agency we reach out to for some guidance on this?
Well, the FAA has been struggling with changes to the drone regulations over the past 2 years. And there was a recent change just this summer, I think. I was
Well, how-
reading about it.
Well,
How about
a drone just hit a military helicopter.
So, how about a response to this letter simply saying that we have reviewed your policy and we support it?
Support how?
Well, that's,
It's there. I don't know what they
How do you-
were asking.
how do you want us to support it?
That's what I'm saying.
No, we support it.
We reviewed your policy.
I
Thank
like
you.
that they include in here that they can use one if they want to.
Yeah.
Give permission.
I mean, we
No,
can-
I simply say, we should say we review their policy, we support it. What more can we do?
Even supporting this.
Well, they're kind of asking for us to adopt this policy, but how do we adopt the policy
Private property.
for one private property owner?
No, we can't.
Doesn't work that way.
I didn't really understand what they were asking.
Well, they're kind of equating themselves with the Board of Education, so how did we handle?
We never even knew about the board.
It's a
did we? I
policy.
read about it in the paper.
Well, I think they're under the impression that
It has been agreed.
we were involved.
Tony, we're talking about the letter from the JCC. This actually may be something that you can contribute on, and that is, you know, apparently the Board of Education passed a policy, for lack of a better term, they can't pass an ordinance, stating that no drones are to be flown over their school grounds.
Can't do that.
Can't do what?
We're thinking the county's getting the drones for use for emergency management. How are they gonna tell
Well,
them it can't be?
they can pass any rules they want. How are they enforced? I mean, you know.
They're not.
So the question,
ridiculous.
are you aware of any type of enforcement? I mean, like I said,
Not at all.
drones are over airports and pilots are complaining and they can't figure out who's flying them. How would they expect a little municipality like Tenafly to enforce it or figure out who's flying it?
Not just that, the police department's thinking about getting drones themselves to be used for a nature center and for lost people. A lot of things we can use it for.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, and
Absolutely. So
like I said, within a few
it's a win-win.
years, packages will be delivered by drones, most likely.
Okay.
So I think we should just very generic. If they want something else, they can let us know, and we'll put this on the agenda also for the joint use. I'd like to get a sense. We understand you have a policy. You've never sent it to us. We'd like to know what the policy is and how you expect it to be enforced.
What do you do if you see a
How
drone?
do you enforce it? How
Well,
do you
the
enforce
fire service uses it tremendously.
Called drone
when they have a
busters.
fire.
it? Yeah. How do you enforce it? We like it.
It's an advantage, big advantage to have a drone.
Okay. The other letter is for a block party. Obviously, they've had this before, so we'll just give them...
But we're not invited.
Would you invite us? Would you invite us?
No, I wasn't.
Okay. Any questions on the resolutions?
Yeah. I would like to separate two resolutions. The one basically,
Just give us the letters.
yeah, I'm looking at, just give me R17-333 and R17-334.
And do what?
Okay, I'd like to discuss them.
Move into new business?
Whatever
Which
they are.
are they? What are
The
they?
change order.
Okay, these are the change orders. One is says it's a bit misleading or whatever. Anyhow, Riverside Cooperative Road Improvement Program. And it says, as you are aware, DNL Paving Contractors was the low bidder, was awarded the contract in the amount of $494,573. During construction, additional concrete and asphalt driveways were installed. The cost was $78.60. So they asked for additional $78.60. Now,
When you say we asked for it.
we asked. Okay, so now the question is, this was a road improvement program. Did the road change? Where is the? I mean, we had a plan. They show a plan. They basically had it was a common bid between multiple suppliers. They came in with a quote. We approved it, and now it's like, okay, we want more money.
No. It doesn't work that way. What happens is that when we bid with the Riverside Co-op, there are alternates in the bid. We basically focus primarily on the asphalting because there are certain things that are just too germane to every individual community. Keep in mind, we have this bid consists of 8 different towns. So basically, these are the things that we resolve in conjunction with the contractor on a local case-by-case basis. So we needed to understand, and Susan can jump in if she wants, we needed to understand exactly how much money that we had, because it would always be our preference to do the curbing while we're doing the street resurfacing. But we needed to wait and see what the primary work was going to cost and if we had the additional funds available. And to have the company do the concrete work while they're there, which is far less expensive.
So this,
doing a
because
separate
that's what
bid.
is not.
But we asked for it. No, I don't want you to have the impression that the company gave us one price and then changed it. We requested.
No,
the
that's what I did. It was not clear
I'll
yet.
give you an example, okay? Up on Hickory Avenue, there was a driveway that was really substandard, and the people wanted, we're not going to do their driveway, but we did their apron. This isn't figured into the original cost. There are, like I said, and it says right here, during construction, additional concrete and asphalt driveways were installed. The cost of the additional work is $78.60. Now, before that work is done, it's done with the approval of the engineer and Bob Culvert.
What it is not written over here, that's why I brought it. It was not written at our request, at the town request.
I have suggested to you in the past, in the effort to make these meetings more efficient, that when you have a question like this, you call up the administrator during the day and ask for some clarification, so we don't have to go through this every meeting.
Okay.
There's no reason why we should have to go through these it's very easily explained to you, but it doesn't have to be done in the meeting.
Okay, and the next one is basically 6 light bulbs, and it's $650. Is this the cost of a light bulb, or what is it?
It's the repair work and the halogen bulbs.
Once again, it says during construction, it was determined that additional work was required to repair the electrical box and install 6 halogen light bulbs in
Yeah.
the new bollards.
That's right. So how much
The
was
lights
this?
were considered to be too bright, given the location that they were in. And you couldn't just replace bulbs, you had to replace the ballasts.
Because here it says they replaced the bulbs.
Well, they did, and it says
And the
work was
electrical
required to
box.
repair the electrical box.
So did we
I-
decide
I-
to do
and I-
that?
and I
We
can-
decided to do that.
I can tell you that these lights were obtrusive.
They were bright.
They really were inappropriate. So this is fortunate for that we were
So
considering.
we made the decision to do this.
Okay, that's what we, okay. All right, thank you.
Okay. So can we leave them in?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. I guess anybody have we'll go to old business. Pfister's Pond.
So the committee met, the ad hoc committee, the two members of the Nature Center here. Pass that to you.
You have one, was
Yes, you got it.
That's what
You guys want to sit up there? Pull up.
Thank you.
If you want to pull up the chair.
Yeah, Peter, join the party.
You want to?
All right, so the big question here, is, do we want to save the pond? Okay, I happen to think it's extremely important to save the pond. It's integral to the entire nature center. So that's the first question. The second issue here is, and we asked Peter and Andrew to put together this summary for us, and there's 5 different steps that are going to happen or need to happen if we choose to do this. And it will happen over a period of 24 months. Okay. The worst case scenario cost is about $661,000, as you see here. And there's 4 different activities that have to happen over those 24 months, number 1 to 4. And then item number 5 are the ongoing operational activity that the Nature Center will be responsible for the cost of that. So fundamentally, kind of doing this from memory a little bit, the dam that holds up the water, and jump in if I say something wrong. The dam that's holding the pond and the water in the pond is failing and has been failing. So the water level in the pond is basically deteriorating. So the first thing that has to be done is the dam has to be fixed as the first step in the process.
As well as the dike.
The dike that controls the overflow of the water, like any dam would have. So that gets repaired first. The second thing that has to happen is we have to do some dredging to dig out the sediment that's, I don't have the
From Montana
environment.
Road, yeah, the inorganic sediment.
You raise the water level so you can do these things.
So you raise the water level once you fix the dam, all right? Then you do the dredging to clean out the pond, and then you do the hydro raking, okay? And then the final thing that happens is these pellets go in, which help keep the green stuff from growing back, okay? So that once we've done all this work, we get to maintain the pond at the right depths, control all the greenery, put up a sediment fence or something like that against where the golf course is.
That's it.
Right?
Yeah,
Okay.
part of the.
And that is the entire process. Now, in terms of paying for this, there's 2 ways of paying for this. Is open space money, and I guess we have to have the conversation about Bill, whether it's qualified. We assume it is. And then the TNC is going to do some private fundraising amongst themselves. But the thing about the private fundraising, until they do it, they don't know how much money they can raise. So this is the total bill. So our decision is spending $661,000. If they manage to raise money, then that would offset this cost here. But I think to put a line in the sand, I think this is important. I think we should do this and push it forward.
2 questions, Peter. Item number 2, which obviously is the 800-pound gorilla in the room, right? It's not been made clear to me that we have come to terms with a specific process as far as dredging, how are we going to get the equipment in there? Is this something the county can do where it might not, we might not have to pay for as much as if we went outside the county.
Right.
Have we investigated that particular item?
When I arrived, yes. The Mosquito Commission in the past has done that. The manager or the supervisor that I spoke with has since retired and was replaced by someone else who took on his responsibilities. And so I don't know where that is now. That's a possibility, but it's a far-off possibility because I don't know what their situation is, if they've ever replaced that person, if they're still able to do that. So that would defray some of the cost, but the major cost is
The
removal of the sediment. So to distinguish the the hydro raking is doing the organic, the leaf litter plants. It can only do leaf litter organic material. The dredging is that's why when I saw that they introduced the concept of doing a mini dredge at the back end is where all the things that were laid on Montami, or the inorganic sand, silt kind of things that are filling the back, you can't hydro rake those out.
No.
So that's the idea is doing both of them to actually finish off the pond.
So at this particular point in time, we really can't define exactly what step number 2 is, never mind the cost, correct?
No. Well, we have an estimate.
This is the whole issue, is we've been going around in circles for 2 years. Everyone wants an absolute concrete plan, like we're putting up a building for something that we're not going to know exactly whether we come in via Montagne or whether we can come in through our own parking lot until we start doing it, right? So.
Well, we don't even know who's going to do it, though, right?
Well, this estimate is coming from Mazer.
No, I understand that, but if the county will do the dredging, then we know who's doing it. We know what kind of equipment. We can make a plan as to how they're going to get into the pond. I'm not
That wouldn't change.
The equipment's going to be similar.
Yeah, that wouldn't change much anything. The biggest factor in step 2 would be the dirt, the actual thing.
What to do with it? All right. So what you're telling me is of the $500,000, half of it, 3/4 of it is basically removal of the dirt.
Probably $400,000.
Probably.
So we've looked at this. Mazer's looked at this as this is the maximum it would cost. If through some miracle it turns out that at some point in the dredging process we can actually leave all the sediment on the property somewhere, right? And it takes less time to dredge it, we could wind up spending less than this money. But we're not going in with that range because it's not realistic. They came in with the ceiling of what's realistic.
Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, assuming the council approves this, is step number 1, which we talked about a little bit earlier, and the number will cost us up to $50,000. So I think what would make the most sense is the council prepared to spend up to $50,000 out of the open space fund to do step number 1?
Yes.
Before we answer, can I ask a question? So, Peter, the actual dike improvement, which is going to be make it taller by 2 feet, yeah?
The existing structures, basically we're trying to, when you go, you've been there, so you know there's the concrete structure.
Yes.
That's the control.
Whatever you have it.
It's where you control the height.
Yeah.
It's a gate, it includes a gate.
Right, so the dike is the basically water bypasses it right now. So when you get enough water comes in, it goes right around. So we've probably lost a certain amount of depth. So the idea is to come back in. That is outdated, so they would fix that, and then they would
Can we make it higher by 2 feet? If we do that, so those are the questions I need to answer, so I can get myself also.
Mm-hmm.
If you increase that dike by by 2 feet, would that basically give you overall 2 feet on the pond?
My guess is we probably wouldn't have the water all the way up to the top. We generally don't keep the water to the top.
Would you get like
I would say about a foot.
A foot, okay. Yeah. If you get an extra foot because of the dike repair, is that going to still require as much dredging that we have now, or now because we have high water, you might not need so much dredging. So the whole idea is, do we have a compromise whereby we increase the level of the dike and as such that we decrease the amount of money we spend on the dredging to get something that is going to be more palatable? Can that be done?
I would say no.
Yeah.
Because you have a lower limit.
Right.
You have basically the pond height. You want to maximize the amount of water for
and how much is
oxygenation.
it?
So the problem is, even if we get a foot up here and we gain a foot, that's still not enough. We have a lower level because eventually you're going to hit basalt.
Yes.
Hit, so that's your lower level. So we want to maximize the amount of water that we have.
Okay, and how much
For the health.
do you need to dredge? A foot, 2 feet? How much?
I think they estimated about 2 feet of
2 feet of
material.
dredging.
To 24
Material.
inches.
All right. So, Peter, I think that I wanted to understand that before we. So, yeah, I'm okay.
Okay, so, Jewel, in your mind, what is the action we need to do on this?
We would need to do an ordinance, basically spelling out how we would be proposing to utilize the open space funds. We would need, essentially Bill's determination about eligibility.
I mean, just looking at it off the top of my head, I said it seems to clearly.
So we have to have a hearing.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
and we're going to have the first 50,000 on that.
Well, we're going to just do the hearing for the 50,000? Or we're going to do it for the whole
I
project?
think
I would do the whole.
I think we should do the hearing for the entire, this is a project. We don't want to do this step by step because you don't want to go into this halfway.
And you don't want, and according to Andy, you don't want the permitting process with the NJDEP with this type of project is involved.
Owners.
Yes. Word of the night.
Yep.
So
Okay.
if you give Andy,
You'll put this on the agenda, you'll get this ordinance?
But let's understand. You want a
Decision.
ordinance that allows up to,
661.
and we will release only for the moment the 50,000.
Yeah.
For the
absolutely.
first, for the first one. And anytime we release, we will need to have some sort of approval of the council that we release the extra funds. I'm trying to understand the process.
So, are you concerned about where the money is after it's approved?
What I'm concerned is,
The money's going to stay in the
money
open
stays-
space fund,
stays in
I
the-
trust.
yes.
Right.
The
Until
question is-
Susan gets a word from us that to
Okay.
release $50,000 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I think Max's question is the release of the funds and the step-by-step release part of what we do at a regular council meeting? We authorize payment of bills?
Yes, you will first have to do the ordinance,
Right.
and then it would be on the bill list. and
It'll be
you-
on the bill list.
okay, so because
No, I know Max well enough
Yes.
to understand. We want to know what's going on
Right.
prior to it
Right.
getting on the
Exactly.
bill list.
Setting a
So,
ceiling,
in
but
other
we're not
words,
dumping it.
I think at this point in time, we're
not a
prepared
blank
to
check.
spend up to $50,000 for the dike and that's step number one. When you're ready to proceed to step number two, we need to have it laid out for us as best you can. We
Exactly.
understand there's variables that you might not be able to describe until you get started. But
which is fine. We are in agreement with that.
We're not looking to approve a cost after it's spent.
Right.
We want to know what's going on prior
But
to
we're
it.
clear that the public hearing is going to be over the 661.
Yeah.
Correct.
Right, okay.
And
So we
all-
got 2 steps.
Okay. Are we
But
anticipating
two
that
steps,
Fraser would be doing the
Permit has to all
Oh,
happen.
yes, but hold on, Tony.
Would you say that Montami contributed to the problems that we're having?
Yes.
Is there any recourse in going after them?
well,
Are you asking me or you're asking the mayor?
Whoever.
Well, I hope he's not asking the mayor.
No, I
think
was-
he'd be
I was
better
like,
off
if you
asking
Ask
the
the attorney.
can
You're talking about their the contamination
Yeah.
that comes out. I mean, that's a tough one because leaching, from one property to another is a common problem that exists everywhere. That's if I over-fertilize my lawn and it leaches into another private neighbor's pond, I actually have that problem in my neighbor. Technically, it is a trespass because it's something that you artificially put down onto your property, and it's migrating from your property onto someone else's property. I think it's tough to prove, but there is precedent for.
I think it would be very tough to prove, and also very expensive to go through the process of a lawsuit.
Because if the EP would allow them to put down these particular chemicals for fertilizing their grounds, how could that be a violation?
Do we know that the EP allowed them?
Well, the runoff
Oh,
is a
you have to show that they
Peter,
did
do you want- Peter,
something that was a
So you want
problem.
to add?
Yeah, so there's two parts of it. So they were storing materials on Montami on Drive, which I got them to stop when I arrived here within, it was probably about a year and a half in, I got them stopped. So I have pictures of all those things. The other side of the coin is they're willing to allow us access on Montami Drive to do the remediation. So if you choose to go the route where you're going to say, you put all these materials on here, they work their way over the years into the pond, and that's why now we have to spend the money. You also run the risk of then them saying, well, now you can't, you're suing us for this, now you can't use the road to access it, now we have to figure out a way to access. So you have to weigh what's the benefit of, they probably are allowing us because they recognize their
But the big cost,
contributor.
Peter, the big cost, which is the silt, is it from their leaching, or is this just
It's a
chemicals?
natural. It's a natural.
So the silt. So if
I think
you look at
the back end, I think, is my guess. I wasn't here during the whole time. Looking at it, looking what the conditions were, that probably there was some of the things that they stored made their way through the water system and came in.
Yeah, because they're going to look and say how much damage did I do in your, and the biggest cost is $600 for dredging. What percentage of that one do you consider to be their part of it?
I have no way of knowing.
Okay, let's move on. Max, you wanted to bring up lit?
Yes.
Light-
Well, we
lit
discussed a few things. We discussed last time that we have
Peter.
He's
Thank you. Done?
they trying to kick you out.
Thanks.
Yeah, basically, we discussed last time that we want to put some flashing signs in different locations, and the cost of those flashing signs. I went to Englewood. I talked to the people over there. They are going to give me the cost for their flashing signs, and then I went and looked for some cost that basically those flashing signs cost. And they are on regular poles that the DPW, the one with the hose that they can install, and they are dirt cheap. And in the future, they're going to be even cheaper because it's a battery, 6 LEDs, and a piece of aluminum. So it's no cost practically. So I basically look at them, and we can do something like that and install in the intersections that we have, like by Highwood and
It's the street you live on, Max.
Exactly. Magnolia. I'm trying to make a. It's basically from the mom's school up on Magnolia.
You can't even make this stuff up. You can't.
Okay.
Well, let's not talk about specific locations. That's the job of the police department. If you have a piece of equipment that's significantly less expensive, which I think you do, get the specs, give it to the police chief or DPW to look and see if if it meets our standards. If it meets our standards, then we can consider it at budget time.
Okay.
It's certainly a lot easier to buy 10 of those than 10 of the more expensive ones.
Exactly.
The first thing to find out is, does it meet our standards? Is it something that we can use, or is there a reason why we wouldn't consider buying it that maybe you and I don't understand because we're not in that field?
So I'll be very glad to do so.
Just give the specs to her and she'll
exactly. Their specs are in
All right.
here.
Jewel, maybe we could share that with DPW and police and find out if this is the type of equipment we could use, because it's significantly less expensive.
But do we know the locations? Because the locations are going to dictate the size
Well,
of sign we have to have.
it's up to the police chief. Max is suggesting
Magnolia
and Highwood where there's a crossing guard.
Yeah, and one by the JCC eventually with a flashing sign where we had the people killed.
No. The
Max,
JCC
there's nobody crosses East Clinton Avenue at the
No,
JCC.
forget that. Let the police chief.
Christmas.
We've discussed. There's an old sign on West Clinton Avenue,
that's
which
right, though.
hasn't worked in years. That's another location. A location over here by where the seniors cross from senior housing over to or across Tenafly Road, where Washington
Yeah.
is. There's a consideration also where from the people leave the senior center and walk over to Stop and Shop on River Edge Road, across from the Grove Street and where the South Summit meets. I mean, these are considerations.
North Summit.
It's going to be up to the police
South
chief. I'm pardon?
You want to put one by South Summit?
Yeah.
Well, no, I'm suggesting that these are some of the intersections the chief looks at. It's up to him to tell us where. He's the expert, not us.
Yeah, and given the prices, and we can talk to...
First and foremost,
Let him make the decision where they gotta go.
And
what we have to do.
the intent is just for drivers to be aware of pedestrians?
Yes.
I think Max has seen the same thing I've seen over by the temple on Broad Avenue. It's phenomenal. I mean, you can see
absolutely.
it, and it's
Yeah, but it's almost, Peter, I'll be honest with you though. You drive down to Danglewood, it's over the top. It's like, all right,
Downtown?
enough already.
Dean Drive.
I feel like I'm in a one of those fun worlds. You know, it's like everything's blinking all over. Like,
You don't have to do that.
No, you're
Really?
tying that
Enough
into
is enough.
to the runway lights on the
Right,
street, which are
really.
reflectors. But once again, it's really the job of the police chief to decide what our needs are from a safety perspective, and then implement them. But I think this is a good idea to consider these signs because they're less expensive. We've already covered the dog park. Dan, is there anything else you wanted to add about dog park? We're under old business.
Where's it?
Dog park. Anything on the dog park?
Anything else on the dogs?
No, but I will apply for that grant for the startup, the $2,000 grant.
You're gonna, I'm sorry?
There's a $2,000 grant for
Okay, great.
Does anybody have anything for the good of the order before we go into the public meeting? I have two quick things. One is I just want to inform the council that on August 25th, which was a Friday, we had a problem downtown. There was a tremendous foul odor which went into a number of the businesses downtown. It was caused by a sewer blockage. The sewer blockage was caused by a solidified clunk of grease. This is not the first time this has happened. It creates a significant amount of manpower to locate and move it. And it's caused by restaurant owners who have grease traps not maintaining them according to our code. The code says they must be cleaned by professionals. There must be a log kept as to when they were cleaned and who they were cleaned by. I drafted a letter which was sent to every business in town, including nonprofits that have grease traps, basically reminding them of our ordinance and reminding them that our health inspector will be even more diligent than usual as to making sure they follow the rules. And I asked our health inspector to go beyond that and occasionally check by calling the people that are listed on the log to make sure they were actually there and they did what they were supposed to do, because this creates a real problem. The DPW worked on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, once again clearing the sewer and then flushing it, and it was a mess and a lot of work. The second and only other thing I wanted to discuss was we have been invited. The mayor and council were invited to the 200 Club of Bergen County. This is an organization that supports law enforcement. They do a very nice job. There's a dinner on October the 4th. We've been invited, honoring a bunch of police officers from many towns, and 2 of our officers are being honored there. And for that reason, they thought we might want to go to the dinner.
Yeah.
That's the good news. The bad news is that the tickets are $110 each. So the question I want to throw up here, because I know I'm planning on going, whether or not I have to pay for it myself. Max, I know you said you wanted to
I'll
go.
have to go.
I don't know if anybody else wants to go, but this is not a budgeted item. So, like everything else, if we have a charge that's not budgeted, we have to decide if we're going to pay for it. The options here are we pay for it, we pay our own way, or the borough picks it up. The borough, in all honesty, picks up the League of Municipalities. That's a tradition. If there's a value to that to the municipality, because we go down there and we learn it's an education for elected officials. This is, just a celebration. So my suggestion is we pay for it ourselves, but if anybody else wants to suggest that the borough pick up the cost, now's the time to discuss it, because we have to RSVP. And anybody have any comments?
I think we should pay for it ourselves.
That's fine, ourselves.
How many people are planning on going?
When was it against?
Max?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Who do we make the check, or what's this?
I'll get the information and pass it on to both of you.
Okay.
All right?
Just so you know, that's the same night that we're having, just interject it, the chamber networking event. So we'll have to figure out, a couple of us go to one, a couple of us go to the other. What time is this dinner?
6 o'clock in Garfield.
Okay.
The Venetian?
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to close.
I have one item that popped up today.
It just popped up?
Honestly, it did. A resident sent over a picture of a sign that said dogs are prohibited in playgrounds, and it referenced an ordinance from 2007. So in doing my research, yes, there was this ordinance in 2007, but it wasn't in the code anywhere to be found. And I checked, and there was no ordinance rescinding that. But when we did the ordinance regarding smoking in just in general, the no smoking policy, there was one section that covered no smoking in the parks, and that wasn't enumerated to be the next letter, so that replaced the not having dogs in playgrounds. So it's not like I can't call coded systems and say, okay, make this a J or K. We would have to do a new ordinance to put that back on the books. But I didn't want to drive the ordinance without confirming that we wanted to have it.
Well, I know there's a sign in Froggy Park. I know there's a sign over here at, what's the name of the park again? I'm sorry. Griffin Park. I know that the Board of Education has signage at a number of their facilities. So, basically you can walk your dog here, but you just can't take them into the park, all of which these facilities are fenced in. So the dogs aren't allowed inside the fence. I think we should create an ordinance or an amended ordinance to put that into the code.
Okay.
All right?
I'll do that.
Anybody have any objection to that?
Yeah, we have to change the sign.
This is also something that should go a joint use. Just let them know that we're doing this.
Okay.
And we should thank the citizen for that and all the other things he's doing for us. Okay, if that's it, entertain a motion to close the work session. We'll stay in here.
So moved.
Second? A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Do you want a 5-minute break?
Yes.
Yes.
We don't have a closed session tonight, do we?
No.
We can get food anyway.
The good news is I went to Costco today.
I was going to say,
This is deep revenue, not bark. Bark is bacterial.
So what happens with
I'm not an expert, so I can't. In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act, the notice requirements have been satisfied. Meeting dates for the year are confirmed at the annual meeting. Are posted on the public bulletin board in the lobby of the Municipal Center, published in the Record within the first 10 days of the new year. Copies of all revised or additional meeting notices are sent to be attached to the Record, Suburbanite, and Northern Valley Press, and are posted on the public bulletin board in the lobby of the Municipal Center. Salute to the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I'm pleased to see that
Nobody knew. Surprise.
Roll call, please.
Councilor Barzilai?
Yes.
Councilor Bass?
Yes.
Councilor Clark?
Yeah.
Councilor Conley?
Yes.
Councilor Medina?
Here.
Mayor Rustin?
Here.
Should ban watching the NFL.
Revisions to the agenda?
None.
Public comment, is there anybody that would like to speak? I'll go around starting here. All right. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
A second? All in favor? Call the roll, please.
Councilor Barzalato?
Yes.
Councilor Bash?
Yes.
Councilor Park?
Yes.
Councilor Conley?
Yes.
Councilor Medina?
Yes.
Okay, public hearing on salary ordinances.
The following ordinances published herewith were first read by title only on September 12, 2017, and posted on the bulletin board of the lobby of the Municipal Center. Ordinance number 17-15, an ordinance to amend the title, salary, wage, or compensation of the employees of the Tenafly Administrative Employees Bargaining Unit for the calendar years 2017, 2018, and 2019. Ordinance number 17-16, an ordinance to amend in ordinance to fix the salary, wage, compensation of certain management, administrative, civilian, dispatchers, and part-time employees of the Borough of Tenafly in the County of Bergen and State of New Jersey for calendar years 2017, 2018, and 2019.
Public comment on this ordinance? Dan, you want to read it?
I move to pass and adopt on second and final reading ordinance 17-15 and 17-16, that notice of same shall be published according to law.
Is there a second? Second. Please call the roll.
Councilor Barzalato?
Yes.
Councilor Bash?
Yes.
Councilor Park?
Yes.
Councilor Conley?
Yes.
Councilor Medina?
Yes.
Okay.
Just a comment.
A comment? Sure.
Yeah. No, and I just wanted to note that one of the actions that you approved tonight was appointing Susan as our certified tax collector. So I think we want to thank her again because she really had to work hard and study hard to pass that exam in order to provide the service for her. And as you know, the resolutions that you passed this evening allow her to reorganize the finance.
On behalf of all the residents of Tenafly, thanks for collecting our taxes. And I will suggest one thing, lower them. They tell me to do that, I can't do it, so maybe you can do it. Anyway. Committee reports. Does anybody have a committee report? Dan, you have anything?
Yes, the Environmental Committee met. They are now desperately looking to, no, this is the Green Team, to repair the greenhouse at Davis Johnson. A lot of the parts are old. Bob Culver can't find the parts for them. Even if he can, he doesn't know. It's a very old greenhouse, and sometime in the future, repairing that should be on the radar for the council.
Well, let's stay on that for 1 second, because I've been witness to conversations of this nature for many, many years.
Yeah, they should just do it.
We need to get an action plan for that. If we can't replace the parts, what are our other options? Would you just reach out to Bob and tell him that, we need to repair the greenhouse, make it functionable again. If he feels that it's functional now, you tell us that, but I don't believe it is.
He's spending way too much time up there. The small repairs he can't do.
Okay. Is that it?
No. The Environmental Commission is also interested in locating locations for the electric car chargers and how to go about which chargers they want to get, and just in general start the conversation with electric car chargers somewhere in the borough.
On public or private property?
Public.
Well, let me ask you a question. Are other municipalities, is this something that municipalities normally get involved in?
I believe
Englewood's doing
so.
Englewood's doing it.
What are they
Englewood
doing?
has
Glen
about...
Rock.
There have dimensions in the record about
On the first floor, the parking lot in Englewood, when you go in, by the New York Sports Club off Dean Street, and on the side street there, but in the parking lot, they have about 6 slots. So they're electric car charges, free parking, you get car charged while you're there.
But you
use
pay for that.
Do you
You pay for the charge.
Do you
yeah.
use the parking garage?
Oh, yeah.
So let me ask you a question. When you go in and out, are those 6 slots ever used?
They are used. I mean, they're not filled with 6 cars all the time, but they are used, absolutely.
So you believe there is a need for this?
Oh, definitely there's a need for it. As a matter of fact, the Tesla cars, the electronic cars, I mean, I have a friend who has a couple of Teslas, And they have apps, so if he's going from here to Boston, he chooses his route by where by the supercharging stations are, and that's where he drives to, charges his car, and then off he goes. So there's a whole system in place. As a matter of fact, I think we should look at that because Tesla may be installing them free.
Yes.
Installing them free, so it won't cost us
I
anything.
called them 3 years ago. We don't fit in their backbone plan.
Well, call them again.
It's 36
Maybe things
months
have
later.
changed.
Yeah, they're coming out with a new, more
Yeah.
expensive
Yeah.
version.
No, right now they finished the backbone.
Why does the borough have to supply
Well,
this?
that's what I'm
It should be
saying.
up to the homeowner. If you want to buy an electric car, buy your own damn charger.
No, that's not what I mean. Is Tesla's installing them for free in particular spots, and they're paying for the electricity also to promote the use of the cars.
Find out,
Might not cost us
Dan,
anything.
their policy may have changed. I mean, I don't know if it comes into play, but there are people in Tenafly that have these
Oh, yeah.
cars.
A lot of people
My
have.
neighbor does.
And it's just not the Tesla, it's every car.
Yeah.
Bolt,
Yeah,
Leaf.
but when you buy the car,
Also-
don't you think you should know ahead of time, like, okay, where do I get the car charged?
Well,
I mean, it's like, if I can buy a car with gasoline, maybe it'd be nice to know where should I
But
get
if it
gas?
doesn't cost you anything,
People
doesn't cost you anything, why
people
not?
have to pay to put them in their house, the charging stations. They have to pay, of course. But the Tesla company is paying to put them in public places
Dan,
so that people have access to the
Let me ask you
electricity.
a question. Now, I understand in a public parking, like garage, like Mark is talking about in Englewood, because it takes a period of time to charge the battery. It's not like you buy gas, right? You go in and in 2 minutes you're done. No, it doesn't? You just-
Right.
Yes, no, it's true.
Charge
It's
real
true.
fast.
You're right. Well, but you have to have at least half an hour. At least half an hour for 15%, then about an hour for 30.
You guys are talking about two separate levels of charging. So a supercharging station is a Tesla-only feature, which is specific to that model.
Yeah.
Not every car has that. For example, the Toyota Prius, 2017 Toyota Prius, is a full hybrid, but it can have a battery mode. It's 30 miles on the battery alone. That's 6 hours to charge. Not everyone's going to come to a parking lot.
Well,
I mean,
that was where I was leading up to. If it takes 6 hours to charge,
You're doing that at
nobody's,
home.
unless you're an employee here that works 8-hour day,
And live
nobody's
within
going to come
30
here and leave their
miles.
car for 6 hours. What, Mark?
So there's a whole host of different dynamics here. If you plug this into the charger that's over there, it'll take 12 days to charge your car. But if you plug it into an outlet that is designed to charge your
Buy the
car with,
transformer.
and the transformers and everything, he's right, it might take a half an hour, it might take 3 hours, and it's all dependent on the vehicle you have, how much time you have to charge the car. So we really have some homework to do before we can
Well,
really
that
get
was
to those
where I was
arguments.
leading up to it. It
Right.
seems like there's a lot of variables
There are.
here. And before, everybody says, well, we should have charging stations, because it's the right thing to do, but
Conceptually.
where, what kind, how much, these are all questions that need to be addressed before we, sign on the dotted line.
Something
So
we have
maybe
homework.
what we could ask the Environmental Commission to do is, give us a report that we can look at, because most of us don't have a clue as to the different types of cars, the different types of charging, where these charge units are recommended. You want to put it can you put it downtown where there's
Exactly.
one parking space? Do you need to put it in a parking lot? How does it work? I mean, Mark described what they have in Englewood. Now, when you say there's 6 spaces are there 6 charging machines, or one charging machine handles 6 spaces?
No, there's six.
Each one of them.
It's like a parking meter.
6 parking spots. It's like a parking meter. There's one for each spot.
Are they all
Paid.
the same for the same vehicle?
That I don't have an electric car.
Because
So
apparently, if you're saying that each model requires a different charger, that doesn't make sense to me.
There is a universal plug. Some of them take advantage of the overcharge, some of them don't. But it's a universal plug most of the time.
Because if you're
If
driving
it's
from
not,
here
you
to
have to put it
Boston,
after.
what if you get off to go to a charger and it's not the right charger for your car?
Well, like I said, what happens is those automobile manufacturers, they plot your route view.
Right.
When you get there, there's a charger.
Okay. I mean, I think Tenafly is the type of town. We should be
Yep.
one of the leaders in this, so we need more information. Anything else, Dave?
Nope, that was it.
Mark?
Chamber of Commerce. For those of you
who aren't going to the 200 Club dinner on October 4th, I urge you to go to the Chamber Mixer.
It's
an
cheaper,
Axiom.
right?
It's free. I'm going to give cards out.
Oh, it's even cheaper.
So now there's no excuse not to go.
Thank you, sir.
What are the hours for the chamber thing?
It's 6:30 to 7:30. Why don't you pass those down? Whoever's available. Axia Tavern, you're right, 6:30 to 7:30.
Free event with cash bar. So you only pay for what to eat and what to drink.
Just what you do.
Just what you drink.
And there is no food.
Well, that's what.
Just actually, the food's excellent.
Yeah.
Well, did they supply hors d'oeuvres? Or they
Oh yeah,
Yes.
there's food, of course, oh definitely.
No, it's a nice place. They had an event there once before. It was
Yeah,
very nice.
very nice.
It
Very
is.
nice. Is that it, Mark?
That's it.
Tony, you have anything? No. We are in the middle of a application at the planning board for the Swift Estate up on Highwood. It's an interesting application because it's a subdivision, and we're awaiting some information because the fire official gave us some requirements which were disputed by the applicant's engineer. So now it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out as to whether the applicant's engineer believed that the standards the fire inspector was using were no longer valid. They were superseded by a newer code. So that makes the application a little interesting. Never mind the fact that the property itself is long and narrow, and it's a very, very interesting property. So we're also going to have an application on 33 Piermont this week, if we get to it. That's tomorrow night. That's the corner house on the corner of Central and Piermont. It's on the southeast corner. It's an old house. I've driven by it a million times, never really looked at it before I got the application. It's actually a nice piece of property, and they want to do some build out. So, anybody? Max, you have anything?
No, I have nothing.
And Paul, you have anything?
No, I don't.
Good. Okay. Anything else? If nobody else has anything, I want to thank everybody for their participation in this exercise. This is my mayor's remarks. I'm very frustrated by what's going on in our country. I'm a football fan. I'm very frustrated by stuff that's going on at the football games and the emphasis that's being put on it. I believe in free speech, but I also believe in people doing things that are appropriate, and protests should be done in a manner that's appropriate. I'm a strong believer in democracy and in our country, and I don't like it when situations degrade our process in our country. Tony?
Well, actually, under new business, I wanted to see if the council would support sending a letter to the NFL saying how upset we are of the actions of the NFL players, and we just wanted to voice our displeasure with the way they're participating when the national anthem is being played.
Well, I
Wait a minute.
No.
You can't do this.
Please.
Not everybody in Tenafly agrees with you, and you can't say Tenafly does.
Well, no.
I'm sorry.
No, we're not. We don't state that Tenafly does it. We state if we send a letter out, we send it from the mayor and council. We don't send it from the residents of
Yes, but you
Tenafly.
represent the people. I strongly object to that.
Okay, so noted.
This is ridiculous. I spent my life in civil rights.
Okay.
Maybe we should go to Arlington Cemetery, take a look there.
I lost my train of thought, but such a letter could be worded in so many different ways. Before I would approve sending any sort of a letter, I'd want to read the letter to make sure that I think it's done appropriately. I'll preface it by saying, and you've said this before, we're getting too involved in national issues, but this is really a national issue. It's not a local issue, and I don't dispute that that I'm disturbed by what's going on as well, but I'm not sure it's our place to do anything of this nature. Other people, comments, please?
I would not vote for such a letter.
If you write a draft, we can review it and discuss it.
Paul?
I would be all right with discussing it.
Dan?
Discuss it.
I'm sorry?
Discuss it.
Tony, you want to try writing it? You want me to try writing it? I mean, I don't care.
Okay, you can.
Okay, what?
You can.
And I understand where Joanna's coming from, because it's not a one-faced issue. You know,
So you shouldn't do it. You
people-
represent the town.
I'm going to ask you,
Well, this is ridiculous.
Okay. You know,
It is.
I think things can be said in a manner that see both sides of the issue. Certainly, I don't know that anybody, whether you support what they're doing or don't support what they're doing, I don't think anybody is happy with what's going on. So, it's
Don't take it on the NFL.
well, I don't think it's the NFL's fault. I think
Absolutely, so,
they're between a rock and a
don't
hard
take it on the NFL.
They're between a rock and
Oh,
a
it
hard place.
absolutely is the NFL's fault.
that's
'Cause
why-
they could be doing something about it.
I suggest, Peter, write a draft,
No, you know what? I'll let Tony write the draft.
write a draft.
I don't think you want me to write that.
Let's keep it.
Well, I'm not sure that I could put something together that would satisfy anybody, because I'm looking at both sides of this issue.
Don't do it.
Well, you could possibly write something that focuses on civil discourse and the importance of it.
I'll attempt to put
African
something
Americans
together.
have been treated civilly in this country, in our history.
I'll entertain a
Please.
motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
This is ridiculous.
Aye.
Why get involved in national politics? What's the point?
Okay.